Okay, is it working now?
What's that? I hope it's boring.
Okay, we got sound? Okay, good deal.
Condolences.
Sorry?
Condolences for today.
Today?
You guys lost.
Did we? Was there a football game today?
Yeah.
You played?
You guys played Chelsea. You played
To Chelsea?
Yeah.
Morris never jokes about that.
His English and his Tottenham supporter. He's a Tottenham supporter, and they lost. And they lost today. So him and Trevor's both crying.
Very good call.
He knows.
At least you'll have it. Is it working?
Michael, yeah, we've got sound. Maybe Michael had an issue driving up. My son just called me. He had an issue coming up Horseshoe Bend Hill with his trailer. Slid back into a guardrail, so he's having to ditch his trailer down the valley somewhere.
Four-wheel drive.
We
are, but we were waiting for that.
That's something Michael Keith's on.
Well, we'll just have to go. What's that?
No definitions.
She's messaged me and Melissa earlier. She's pretty sure she's right.
You go ahead and start.
All right, it is 6:12 p.m. We're going to get this special school board meeting started. Can we get a roll call, please?
Morris Morgan.
Robert Murray.
Sky Davis. And can we all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all. All right, item number 4 is to approve and adopt the agenda.
I have a question, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
On the agenda number 6, it has to do with asking and answering questions. Can you clarify that for us, please?
We would like to have an open meeting where there is open dialogue between, no, is that not what we decided?
Only the attorney.
What's that?
Only the information from the attorney. I thought the attorney was here.
Oh, not the attorney. Michael Smith is going to be here. He's the,
Michael Keith.
or Michael Keith, sorry.
Okay,
He's
Michael
the-
Keith answers.
That there, yes, there can be open dialogue between Mr. Keith when he hopefully gets here. We're hoping it's just the roads that have him and the community. We as a board are just here to be able to hear the community's input. Legally, we are not allowed to engage with the community at this time. If you would like to reach out to a board member and have a conversation with them, that is just fine. But as far as in this meeting, you may ask questions of Mr. Keith and he can help answer some of those. Did that help answer that?
Yes.
Mr. Morse.
So just so you guys know, the board will not be answering questions because this meeting is held in the school. The paper, these papers are printed on, was paid for with school money. So we can only give you information. We cannot promote or do anything else because of how it is structured. If we do, we don't endanger ourselves or the school in any way. The only thing that we put in jeopardy is the bond itself, whether it is approved or not. So that is why legally we are not the ones going to be answering questions. So that you guys know, in case you thought that we would be. It's a legal issue that we can't do. Thank you. I move that we approve the agenda as listed.
We have a
A second.
motion and a second. Any further discussion on this topic? All those in favor say aye.
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 He's not here.
What's that? Motion is approved.
Hey, wait, this guy, just a clarification, is that 3 ayes or just 2? I haven't heard.
Did you say
Oh,
aye? Yeah, 3 ayes, yes. And then we are now waiting for Mr. Michael Keith, who is a bond attorney with Piper and Sandler, to hopefully be able to help us with these. Mr. Thompson, do you have anything that you would like to discuss on this topic before
Yeah.
Michael gets here?
We put together a little fact sheet. And there are copies on the table over there if any of the public would like to grab a copy of that. That talks about some of the facts around the supplemental levy, some of the things that it could be spent on and different things. So that's over there. I guess we can't go forward in the agenda though to where they could
We cannot. I mean,
speak. You'd
because,
have to amend the agenda, I guess, to do that. wouldn't you?
yeah, because Mr. Keith is really who needs to hear these questions, to be able to field these questions for them.
Can we, Mr. Chair, can we jump to item 8? And then if Michael Keith gets here and the community has more questions, and we can get back to number 8 again? But there might be some questions or some issues that they'd like to voice outside of that. You can get that out of the way.
I mean, really, all of these, any of their questions, it's best to be heard by Mr. Keith. I will.
Because we
is
can
there any way
answer
we
it.
can try to contact him.
You got a cell number, Lydia? Yeah.
I'm sure he's on his way.
Yeah,
There's fun people driving slow.
Well, I just came from Boise, and the roads weren't awesome, that's for sure. So I'm
just
sure.
as a point of clarification, if someone from the public asks, are we allowed to answer questions about money? I mean, factual questions? We're not allowed at all?
When?
Huh?
When?
At any point when they
At-
like, if they
no,
ask them the number
no.
8? No? Okay.
Well, no, I'm saying no to what you're saying, not to your question. At what point in the meeting do they ask the question?
I'm thinking, well, I guess in item number 6, when he does his presentation, if they have a question that he couldn't answer,
No.
but I know the answer to, I'm not allowed to answer that.
I'm going to advise you not to,
Okay, that's fine.
because if it is construed that your response promotes
Is
the
advocated, right.
levy,
I got
then
you.
it puts the levy in jeopardy.
Gotcha. Got
Yes, sir.
Yes, we started the meeting, but the next item on the agenda has not arrived yet. And so that's why we can't continue.
So this is where they ask their questions, right?
No,
Or is it like
no, they ask the questions.
to the attorney when he's during his presentation? Okay,
This is just for the input.
yeah.
Public comment. Not question. The reason why we do that is when you ask a question and you answer it, you get yourself in trouble. You say, oh, yeah, I understood. Also, one person answers, what if there's another one that disagrees with you? And then, at the end, once they ask a question, you give an answer, they have another question, and now you have a back and forth. This is not a public uses. This is a board of held in public. But the schools gotten out of trouble by answering questions because something I don't know the answers of incorrect.
So it's not hard to vote.
We can also because this one we use school funds in this meeting, so we can answer information questions, but but sometimes we go a little bit too far. You know, like you get into somebody and you explain, it's like, oops, now you press the wrong. Because you cannot use school funds to promote.
Well, because he told us last time, he said, no, you guys can have one, you just can't vote.
That's nice. And so when people come to a meeting like this, listen to what is being said. And if you really do that, then they're sick.
So we could table all, we'd have to table them. And until later in the board, in the meeting, not table from this meeting, but table it until after community forum. And we can do the community forum now. Right?
Yeah, that's what I'm suggesting. Yeah. Do community forum now, but we can also do community. But we can do community forum now and later. Because the question, like, I mean, just comments. Just ask them if they have comments. Look who's here. Basically,
I don't know. Set a precedent. I don't know if you do it in the future.
but it's because of, and that's your justification. What you can do, sitting here.
Mr. Thompson just will check and see if
Because we can go to community forum until such time that we attend the votes. Otherwise, it's not useful.
right. Otherwise, we're here for no reason.
So you want somebody to make a motion?
Yeah, let's wait for Mr. Thompson to get back real quick. Well, we can't,
You can't.
because we have to have
You have to vote in the next meeting. One vote.
So here they are, in there. Yeah, all we're better not together.
which is
It could be in the
could be a good thing. It could be between here and awesome.
Right. It's so good. Basically a candy, but I can pick up KXUD first thing help. Radio
line of sight.
Yeah.
Because in Longman, there's two places on 55, two places. I'll get it fixed. I can even make a phone call.
I can make phone calls from a couple of places and I'm not personally feeling like if I go up through Bear Valley and stuff, there's like 2 or 3 spots and I pull over, I can have a full conversation.
Yep. You get to know that.
It used to be, I knew where all of the hotspots in the entire valley were. Like at my grandparents' place, where my grandpa parked his tractor, if you sat in the seat of the tractor and he parked it in just the right spot, perfect service. When I was growing up, I used to call girls from Boise. We're coming down. You guys want to hang out?
This is the USB right here. You can plug in. We're at your point, so we're ready for you.
How are you doing, Michael? Good to see you.
The traffic's kind of nuts. Huh?
Yeah, it was super slow. Once it was fine until it was not.
Yeah.
It was pretty slow. I started getting slick after that.
That's where he had his problem.
She didn't make it.
Just let me know when you're ready, Michael, and we'll introduce you.
Okay. I'll give you a few minutes to.
Yeah, no problem.
Our prayers were answered.
Nothing like a little bit of excitement.
You the chair to sit down.
Oh, okay. Just improvise.
If your laptop will reach to here, there's a microphone right here, so we're live on YouTube, so the public at home.
Perfect. I'll make sure I speak up when it's
Presentation and all.
okay.
Turn it around.
All right.
Okay.
Okay, so this is Michael Keith. He's our bond attorney with Piper Sandler and Company. We want to thank him for coming out and being willing to present this to the community and maybe help everybody understand a little bit better what it is that we're all talking about here.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, if I could clarify who I am. We're not the attorney, we're the financial advisor to the district. Don't ask me any legal advice. It's not going to get you anywhere.
We've got something else.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys very much for the opportunity to be here. Obviously, weather delayed me a little bit today, but I'm excited to be up here and talking to you guys this evening. As I mentioned, as I started, I've worked with Garden Valley School District since 2014 as its financial advisor. And the district has kind of asked me to come up and kind of talk to you guys about the supplemental levy that they're thinking about going forward, and kind of give some background information about kind of levies, how they work, how the taxes work, and hopefully kind of be able to really kind of create a foundation for the community as the district kind of decides, what it wants to do in an upcoming election for the supplemental levy. So kind of jumping in on that, I always think when we're thinking about a foundation that we kind of understand what it is that school districts can levy for. What are the different types of levies that we can vote for? Because sometimes it's confusing. Some districts have more than one, and Garden Valley School District is one of those districts. They have a bond levy, and they have a supplemental levy currently. And sometimes when there's a vote for a levy, there's some confusion over what it is that's getting authorized. And each one of these levies have their special purpose for school districts. And so I thought it'd be valuable to kind of start there with my screen here. So the bond levy, that's the one that allows a district to go up and finance more than 1 year, right? Have that capital financing for projects to build school facilities. You know, typically it requires a supermajority vote, and it does two things under Idaho law. One, it gives permission to the school district to borrow money for longer than 1 year and up to 30 years. The second thing that it provides for the district is a specific bond levy, and it's not a revenue source for the district that specifically goes for bonds and to repay debt. And that levy, and this is kind of important when we kind of talk about some of the mechanics of the levies of the district, those funds can't be used for anything else. So even if they have reserves sitting in that account, the only thing they can do with those reserves is apply it to debt service, right? It's not something they can transfer to general funds or do something different with. The other levy that's also a capital levy that a school district could have, and Garden Valley School District does not currently have this levy, is called a plant levy. Now that one is not long-term borrowing, but it does provide specific tax dollars to kind of operate and maintain facilities, right? And really kind of the purpose of that is, you know, kind of ongoing maintenance of school district facilities, whether that's parking lots, roofs, maybe you need to do some, you know, maintenance on your heating system. And so most of the time, unless you're a large district, most of those funds are targeted towards those kind of long-term, ongoing needs of the district from a capital perspective, rather than trying to, you know, pull those funds from the general fund. And the other one, which is what we're here to talk about in yellow on the right, is the supplemental levy. And the supplemental levy has the lowest voter threshold at 50+1. Also has the broadest application because those funds can be used for anything that general funds can be used for. So the district can use that to help support programs, salaries. It can be used for capital facilities, right? There's really not a lot of strings attached to those funds, but as the name suggests, right, it supplements the budget. And therefore, it's a 2-year maximum levy that you get to levy. And then at the end of that 2-year, school district reevaluates its need for the supplemental levy, decides whether it needs to go back for voters, you know, whether it's more or less same, but it can determine that on an every other year basis on that. So a little more detail. We talked a little bit about the bond levy. The other thing to recognize is there is a debt cap that goes along with the bond levy, which is a 5% of full market value. We talked about the capital projects, you know, what it's typically used for. The other thing that does go with a bond authorization there are a couple other state programs that could be utilized if you're going to finance facilities. And that's the bond levy subsidy program, which is a direct payment to help offset debt. Garden Valley School District doesn't qualify for that right now on its existing bonds, more because how the formula works. The district has high market value relative to the amount of students that it supports. So the unfortunate nature of the state program's calculation says that, you know, the district doesn't currently qualify. It's calculated every year. It doesn't mean the district wouldn't qualify at some point in the future, but currently it doesn't. Other program, Idaho School Bond Guarantee, that's just a credit enhancement program to kind of help with interest rates on that. Plant facilities levy, again, talked about that, capital projects. The one thing to note about the plant levy, if the district were ever to run one, is that it has a unique feature of voter approval where you can either be at 55%, 60%, or supermajority. That really depends on your overall combined bond and plant levy. And that's kind of what drives the voter threshold on that. There are some ways to leverage that long term. Typically, school districts don't do that because they have other options available to them. But it is something that could be leveraged under a lease type program. And then again, simple majority on the supplemental levy. Really, the only unique thing to kind of point out on this slide with the supplemental levy is there are some school districts that over time qualify for what we call a permanent supplemental levy. And in fact, Teton County School District is considering this. They haven't decided whether they will run one or not, but if your supplemental levy becomes more than 20% of your budget annually for 7 consecutive years, then under Idaho statute, that allows you then to go to voters and make that a permanent levy on an ongoing basis. So if we shift gears a little bit more and kind of dive into Garden Valley School District and tax levies in general, this slide is really intended to kind of give you an historical picture of where tax rates have been for Garden Valley School District and what some of those drivers are that kind of help determine what that tax rate is. One of those is, market value, right? So if I'm trying to collect, $1 million on a smaller tax base, right, that tax rate is going to be higher than if it's going to be on, a larger tax base. So as the tax base grows, and you've kind of seen this over time, that tax rate can come down, right? I can generate the same amount of dollars or even maybe slightly more dollars and still be at a lower tax rate. Now we'll get to some of the dynamics of, how that impacts a taxpayer, because there are some things to think about. It's not as simple as lowering the tax rate and then everybody's taxes go down, unfortunately. And some of those things are out of the school district's control. And so we'll kind of dig into that a little bit more. If you kind of look at the historical picture of the district, you'll see there's this orange bar in 2005 and 2006 that is kind of categorized under all other levies. And so why is that so big relative to the rest of the years? Well, there was a time when school districts could levy a maintenance and operations levy. So not a supplemental maintenance and operations levy, but a maintenance and operations levy that was based on the tax value of the district and was not supplemental, but was general fund dollars, right? That could supplement what the state was providing to the school district. And it was a nice source of funds, and it was something that could offset state funding, right? And depending on your community and how it was doing, we oftentimes talk about in our state kind of the three-legged stool in terms of how the state gets its funds from property tax, income tax, and sales tax, right? It gave the school districts another option for funding. That was also a time before the financial crisis when kind of what the current period we're in, right, that market values were going up. And there was some concern overall about taxes. And so one of the ways they tried to address that is they removed the M&O levy from school districts, and they replaced that with a 1% increase in the sales tax to try to fund schools. Unfortunately, that was right before the crash happened, and so it created some challenges for school districts going forward. And if you kind of went back on this historically, I don't know the exact numbers off the top of my head, but approximately about 65 school districts out of 115 school districts at the time had supplemental levies, smaller ones. After the financial crisis, that went up significantly because supplemental levy was the only way school districts can go to the community and raise those additional funds to offset what it lost in losing its M&O levy during a financial crisis where that money was getting substituted from the state because of sales tax, right? And because there was not a lot of economic activity, sales tax collections for the state went down. And so you saw a lot of school districts go to voters, ask for supplemental levies, and get those in place to supplement their budgets and try to maintain the programs that they've had in place. And that's remained true today. Most of those school districts have kept those. Some have increased them. Some have tried to decrease them. But it's taken a lot of time for the state to fund back to 2008 levels. And even when you think about funding back to 2008 levels, costs of things have gone up. So that's, I think, been a real challenge for school districts when you kind of look at a historical perspective of this. So I wanted to dig into market value growth a little bit more. Remember, kind of at the start of this, I talked about that, tax rate going down or tax rate going up kind of depends on where the market value growth is coming from. Because there's really kind of two drivers behind the school district's market value growth going up. One is revaluation of home values, right? And a lot of you have seen that. We are in a time period, certainly in Idaho, and certainly in this community and others nearby, that home values are being driven up a lot. And it's because we have people moving in, we have people paying cash. There's a lot of demand, not a lot of supply, and that dynamic is pushing valuations up. And, of course, the challenge with that is, taxes are what we call ad valorem taxes, right? And so those are taxed on the value of your home. And as that home goes up, if the tax rate stays the same, your taxes will go up. Now, you can try to offset that with lower taxes, but none of the homes go up at the same rate, right? So it's really difficult to say to anybody that nobody's taxes won't change. And because the school district doesn't control the valuation process, all they can do is control kind of what their budgets are and their tax rates are on that. And you saw that again over time, that as the market value went up, tax rates, came down on their levies. Now, the one thing that does help school districts or any community that's levying a tax is if there are new taxpayers into the system, right? And so if the growth comes from new taxpayers rather than revaluation, right? And let's say the dollar, and I've got more people paying for that dollar and taxes go down, now I've distributed the taxes over more people, right? And so that's where there can be a benefit from an increase in market values. But again, it's tricky, and there's a lot of moving parts to the taxes and market values that make it challenging when you're trying to set tax rates. So I apologize, this is kind of small, but I'll try to do a good job of describing this for those that are watching us and also in the audience this evening. What this does is it takes a snapshot and really kind of drills into Garden Valley School District's taxes going back to fiscal year 2018. And it does a couple things. It shows overall market value of the school district and how that has increased over time. If you look at fiscal year 2018, market value there was about a 416 million. You can see by 2022, almost doubled in that time frame, right? We're almost at 783 million in terms of a total increase. And you can see those rate increases, right, of 15%, 14%, 19%, then again, 19%. So those are significant. And again, a lot of that is coming from revaluation, as you saw on the other slide. Some of that is coming from, new construction, but a lot of it is that existing home prices are going up fairly significant in the community. And I'm sure you guys have seen that on your tax bills when you received them in the mail. The other part of this slide, the lower part, where we start to get into the levies, shows the levy amounts and kind of how those have changed and fluctuated in terms of total dollars, kind of based on the district and what they're trying to accomplish each year and what they're allowed to levy. So kind of as the base case in fiscal year 2018, you've got a tort levy, which is really small, of about 7,800. Emergency levy, a couple of years, that's where you get an influx of students into the district that was not accounted for. And so under Idaho statutes, you can, levy for an emergency levy to try to get some additional funds in to help cover the costs of new students coming into your school district for that year. The other part is, the bond levy, right? So we're repaying, the bond amount on the books. And then the last one on here is the supplemental levy, which in 2018 was $350,000. So at that time, on a market value of $416,000, the district levied about $1.4 million in total tax dollars at a tax rate of about $337 that year. Rolling forward into 2019, that year taxes dropped. The school district had some bond reserves that year and utilized those, and so they under levied for the bond. Bond payments are about $970,000, somewhere in that ballpark. The district actually levied $150,000, and you saw that the emergency levy came off, that year. And so in fiscal year 2019, 1.2 million was levied at a tax rate of 251. Taxes had to recover into the next year. You had some growth. You went from 480 to 550 million. And tax dollars went up some, still below FY 2018. But, kind of saw the bond rate go back up to $1 million to kind of collect some of those reserves back for the district. Supplemental levy stayed the same. FY 2021, we saw emergency levy come back on district again in trying to manage taxes that year. Backed off on its bond levy fairly significantly to bring on the emergency levy and kept taxes relatively level at 1.3. And then this last year, again, saw significant increases, wanted to kind of build those reserves back up. We also had an increase in there of additional 50,000 on the supplemental M&O. So this last year we had 1.6 million, but still the lowest tax rate, right, at 2.06 on that. So that's kind of a historical perspective of what has happened with, the school district's levies over the last 5 years. Now, if you break that levy impact down, and this is where it starts to get a little tricky with the math, because again, there are some moving parts that the district doesn't control. If you look back at 2018, and this is kind of ballparks looking at Zillow data going back to 2018 in terms of kind of what the approximate median home value in Garden Valley was. And at that time, it was about 243,000. You had a homeowner's exemption of 100,000. And your taxable value on that home would have been 143. Well, so if you had a tax rate of 337, that meant on your annual taxes from the school district would have been 482 that year. As the price of that home goes up, right, we increase the home from 243 to 270, same homeowner's exemption. So this is something that has changed a few years ago too. The homeowner's exemption used to be indexed for a few years, right? And so as home values rose, there was an index that allowed the homeowner's exemption to rise with it, right? And help homeowners offset rising values. That's important because as an individual's home value goes up, and let's say business valuation stays relatively the same or isn't growing as fast, there starts to be a tax shift happening. Even if you had taxes exactly the same, and dollar amount, not even if we're talking tax rate, but dollar amount, because your home value is going up and that homeowner's exemption is not keeping up with that increase, there starts to be a tax shift that happens. And that's been a challenge that tried to get somewhat addressed this last year in fiscal year 2022, when you've seen, again, home values go up fairly significantly, 425,000. And again, just to kind of point this out, these are valuations as of January 1, right? So this tax year that we're going into in 2022 will be valuations based off of January 1, right? So any growth that happens during 2022 would actually get counted in 2023. So just to kind of give the community an idea how that works. So we got a home value of 425. Well, homeowner exemption did go up, helped some, but certainly didn't go up as much as we've seen home values go. And so you see a homeowner's exemption at 125,000 now. You're still getting to a taxable value of 300,000, which is double what your median home taxable value would have been again in 2018. So you saw taxes start to increase, even though tax rates came down. And if you look at between for 2020 to 2021, it went from 247 to 211. But taxes only went down $10 annually. Again, it's just because home values went up so much, that year. And it's a piece of the formula that the school district just does have no control over. And then, of course, they tried to kind of regain some of those reserves in 2022 And so we did see some increase there at about even though again, tax rate went down, but total taxes at 617 annually, again, on that median home value. So potential proposal, and I'm not sure how much has been talked about this, but I'll kind of talk about this slide and I'll let the district administration or the board weigh in on any additional information on this. So if we start to look at, again, what we certified, or sorry, not what we, but the school district certified this year in terms of total taxes at $1,612,000. One of the things that the district has talked about are, again, kind of like they've done in the past with the emergency levy, are there some options for the district to try to get additional supplemental funds that's needed, but try to be as neutral as possible on the taxes side of it. And, again, because they had built those reserves back into the bond fund, the district has some flexibility there, again, to back off on that bond levy and increase the supplemental levy. So under this scenario, we go from, again, $1,612,000 this year, $1,612,000 projected for next year. The difference is that we're going down on the bond levy from 1.2 to 1.1, and we're going up on the supplemental from 4 to 5, right? So, kind of an offsetting shift. But again, if you kind of look at valuation, so let's say we had 15% growth in total market value, and let's recognize that maybe some of that is coming from new construction, and maybe your valuation's only going up 12.8%. Even though the district's tax rate went from 206 to 179, so same amount of taxes being certified, taxes are still going up. Again, it's that tax shift that's happening. Homeowners exemption is not keeping up with it. So you go from a home value of 425 to a home value of 479, same homeowners exemption, your taxable value goes up to 354, and you're still getting a $17 annual increase on that. Again, it's more just to kind of drive home that there are some things that make it a little challenging to say that there won't be any changes to taxes. But the district can try to be as neutral as possible when it's trying to set its budget each year to try to limit the impact of those increases. I think that's it from a slide perspective. So I will stand for questions, and also if there's any additional comments from the board or the administration on this.
And we've actually opened it up for the possibility for any of the folks that are here tonight, if they've got any questions that you possibly could answer. So.
I'd be happy to.
The 7-year continuous levy that you where it maintains for 7 years, they make permanent. Is that the same levy for 7 years or multiple levies over a 7-year period?
It's the same levy. So it doesn't have to be the same amount that it was for 7 years. It can go back to the voters for whatever amount, but it is permanent at that dollar amount. So it doesn't give the authority to the district just to levy whatever it wants at that point. If it wanted to increase the permanent supplemental levy, it would have to go back to the voters to do that.
And what is the percentage of that supplemental levy as it applies to the budget? Has it hit the 20% yet? Is it 10%?
It's 20% of general fund revenue. So it's not net. It's just, of your total revenues coming in. So if you were to look at your audit and look at kind of top line revenue and said like, hey, total revenues coming in is, $10 million, right? And part of that is your supplemental levy. If 20% of that $10 million, so $2 million of it is your supplemental levy, then you would qualify for that.
And the question is, what is the current percentage for our budget now of the supplemental levy?
It's less than 10%.
Supplemental is 400,000, and our budget is around
5.8.
5.8
Yeah.
million.
So it's less than 10%.
Yes, sir.
So, do you have an idea how much you want to ask for the next levy?
I will leave that up to the district, because that's a district question and not a advisor question in terms of what they want to ask the voters for.
Yeah, you can answer.
Page 10.
Yeah.
Can you put that last slide up?
You bet.
So, and if you look on your bullet points, we did an analysis of the budget compared to what we get from the state and what we spend out. And the difference, and I think it's the last bullet point on the back of the first page, the difference is about $563,484, okay? Right now, we have a $400,000 supplemental levy, so we would still be short by $163,000. So we are considering a $500,000 levy in this example that he has up there, and that's the reason for considering that. So, does that
If you-
answer the question?
If you go back one page to page 10. No. The supplemental levy impact. No. That's the last page.
It's actually forward. There it is.
Yep.
That one?
So first column is 400,000 in blue, second column is 500,000 in blue. Don't you guys have?
The blue ones? Is
Oh,
that the one
sorry.
you're talking about, Morris?
Yeah. Is there a way to zoom in on that, make it a little bit bigger? To answer your question, Ken, 500,000 is what we have put in with these calculations. And because of the market value increase, the total levy rate is 1.79, and last year it was at 2.06. So even raising that, it actually drops the rate. Yes.
Correct me if I'm wrong, it drops the rate, but it doesn't drop the dollar.
Doesn't necessarily drop the dollar, no.
Yeah, it's a $17 difference on a median home, right? That's at the bottom.
Correct. And that's projections. I was kind of showing kind of what would happen with growth, just to kind of set the stage that, even if the school district, again, is neutral, right, on this levy increase for the supplemental levy, so again, school district's not getting more dollars from that slightly tax increase. It's just that there's a tax shift, right, away from other property owners that don't fall under a homeowner's exemption, right? Whether that's, farmland or that's commercial property, whatever that might be, it means that your valuation is going up a lot quicker than somebody else's, right? And so now you're taking up a bigger piece of the pie, which means you're getting allocated more taxes as a result.
Just a comment and another question. That's kind of how you sold the last bond. You're talking $17 difference here versus what was it, $30 difference 2 years ago or whatever it was. So you're really not saving money. You're not really spending just that much more. If that bond doesn't pass, or the levy doesn't pass, you're saving a ton of money. So there may be just a few dollars difference, but if it doesn't pass, you're saving a lot of money. The taxpayers are saving a lot of money. That's how you sold the last one.
That's a comment.
Board can't really comment.
Did anybody else have any questions for Mr. Keith here?
What happens if the levy doesn't pass?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that's, so less dollars, right, to the school district. So, the gap becomes not 163,000, it becomes the full 500,000, right? And so that's, in that case, you'd have to go back to the district and say, well, just like with any budget, right? If you cut my revenue, I got to cut something, right, to do that. And so that's a community question, right? In terms of, whatever the supplemental levy is supporting, if that's a value to the community to maintain, then, great, keep the levy. But, certainly if those funds go down, right, then it's a rebalance. And then that just means, either positions got to go or something has to be cut at the district level, right? Because they have to have a balanced budget on that. And that would be kind of a question for the district you're trying to answer. That says like, well, if we don't have this means, X, for the district.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, maybe more answer is. So we look at what the special ed expenditures were for the district. We all know that tons of people moved up here with children, with special needs, seeking the small school, without really considering how it's going to put a monetary burden on the community, on the school. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that has to be met. You do not have a choice. You have to meet those special needs students. So that tells me that huge amount, it has to stay. So that tells me that programs for, kids that are seeking higher levels of learning go away. Programs for the average student go away. Classes for the average student go away. Is there not some more funding available to defray those costs other than property tax dollars?
Again, that's kind of a question for the district,
Well,
Until the end of 2020, we do have funds that are used for learning loss. Up to 100% of our total funds can be used for learning loss, but 20% of our latest ESSER 3 allocation has to be used for learning loss. So that can include additional opportunities. But again, that expires in 2020. Some already used for some of the expenses that we've already incurred.
So I would think when I do a budget, this is how much money I have to make my budget fit. So what is the school doing to look to what can they cut? Are we top cutting? Do we have more administrators than what we need? What are we doing responsibly for our community to cut what we can instead of just keep going back to the community and keep getting more? And this building has a capacity cap, correct? We can't have more than so many people in the building at a time. How can the school not have a capacity cap on sped? Because it's gonna run the rest of your kids out. And you're gonna lose kids in the school, which is gonna lose funding because parents can homeschool kids because they get a better education at home because the parents and the homeschool opportunities can help the kids who want to strive higher.
I don't want to interrupt, but I think we might be moving more into public forum stuff and questions for Mr.
All right. Yes, Ken.
I was just curious. I was looking at the last page here, and there's a lot of items on there. I was wondering how much was it?
Sources for COVID. They started back in 2019 with their ESSER one funds, and I can give you chart that's provided everything so I can do that and it will show you all of the funds that have been exhausted as well as all the funds that are current and still available.
Did any of the board members have any questions for Mr. Keith?
Not me?
How many, surely there are other schools out there like us. Do you happen to know the percentage of schools in Idaho that use a yearly supplemental levy?
Yeah, I don't know that it's around. So there's about 115 school districts. there's 90 plus, yeah, that have supplemental levies. And so that was something we kind of talked about up front, that, you know, it used to be less until they took away that M&O levy for districts. And that's when we saw a significant increases. Right at the time they took that away, that's also when we saw the financial crisis happen. And that was really the only tool school districts had to do as it suggests, which is supplement the budget and try to maintain the programs available at the district.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you, Michael, so much for coming up and doing this for us. We appreciate that.
My pleasure.
And ask that you travel safely on your way home.
I will do that. Be nice and slow, I think.
Yeah. All right. Then we will move on to item 7, which is board discussion on supplemental levy. Do either of you have any thoughts, comments you want to share with the rest of us?
Maybe after we get
Yeah,
before that, I don't have any.
okay. I have, the way that I see it, you know, in my mind with a supplemental is, I believe that we need a supplemental levy. I do believe that we're underfunded federally. It's been touched on tonight. But I am curious to hear from the community on, we have a few people that wanted to speak.
Before you go there,
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, discussing the supplemental levy, if I can give some input.
Yes.
We are allocated funds from the state based on full-time equivalents, FTEs, based on the number of students that are attending school. And we stay within those allocations from the state. We do obviously operate to a budget, and as our fact sheet explains, a large percentage of the overage of $563,000 comes from the special education dollars. Those are allocated based on attendance, based on a certain formula that the federal government uses. Typically, school systems have between 9 and 11% of their student population receiving special education services. Currently, ours is at 19%. So we get allocated funds based on a 9 to 11% range, but yet by law, we have to continue to provide services for that 19%. We obviously try to be very good stewards of taxpayer money when we budget. And there are a lot of extracurricular activities as part of the school experience, and we're very particular about approving those things and budgeting for those things, and we will continue to do that to try and lessen the burden on the taxpayers with a supplemental levy. So that's, from the school standpoint, we're very conscious of that, and we'll continue to be very aware of that as we budget.
All right. We're going to move to community forum. Public comment will be taken from the public on matters scheduled on the agenda. The chairman may interrupt or terminate an individual's statement when it's too lengthy, personally directed, abusive, obscene, repetitive, or irrelevant. Total time allotted for public comment will not exceed 1 hour. Public participation will be limited to the time allotted on the agenda. Each speaker will be limited to 3 minutes. All speakers will be allowed to speak at least once. Public comment will be taken from the public on matters scheduled on the agenda. Should a large number of the public wish to speak on the same issue or topic, members of the public are encouraged to select a representative to summarize 1520-2 ISBA 1003 their position. Additionally, the board secretary will accept written comments for distribution to the board. First up, we have Mr. Bill Baker. Bill, would you like to address the board?
If you would come to the podium, there's a microphone up there, and let me turn the camera around so that folks can see you.
That's my goal.
They can see him. And then just for me, I'm going to use this.
All right, thank you. First off, I want to thank you for allowing me to be heard. I also want to thank you for sitting on this board. It is a thankless position, and it requires commitment and dedication. As you deal with tax dollars, it also requires fiscal responsibility, which is the topic I'm concerned with this evening. I came into this thinking it would be, the levy would be related to Mountain Waterworks issue. I didn't hear any of that tonight, so I'll skip that part of my, but when it does come to these expenditures that you seem to be out of control, have you looked for other options? I have a few. You can use the COVID money you received. Even though the money may be earmarked for something now, you can modify your budget and change that line item to a different, so it's not set in stone. You can apply for grants. They're readily available. I don't know if you have a grant writer, but they're worth their weight in gold. You can cut expenditures. That's always an option. Every one of us, like Christy was saying, if we have a home budget, we live within it. We have no choice. We can't just go to the public and hold out our hand and ask for more money. So you can prioritize a lot of these changes, I think, tackle some now, budget for them next year, and tackle them with budgeted money when you have time to plan. So there are options available instead of going to the ballot. So my next statement also relates to the Mountain Waterworks, so I guess I'll skip that also. But bottom line is, my goal in this discussion is to encourage you to review options that are not a school bond or a school levy. Fiscal responsibility dictates you do so. We already have two line items on the tax assessment. One is the bond. I think it originated when the school was built. The other one was 2 years ago, replacing a different levy that had expired, but you got this new levy on the ballot to replace it. So we're back to two. And it sounds like you want to do the same thing with this one. Replace one where we may not need it. So it sounds like our pattern here is consistent. You're going back to the ballot every 2 years, and that's not a good pattern. That's not a good pattern. Right now, I added up my taxes. 30% of my taxes go to the Garden Valley School District. 30% of my property tax goes to the Garden Valley School District. So I voted no on the last bond. I'm going to vote no on this one if it hits the ballot. So I ask that you reduce burden to taxpayers and not do this. So
Thank you for your time. Lisa Willie, you're up. Okay. Okay. All righty. And then, all right, well then that concludes our,
Anyone can speak, if we just made that list so you have, who to call on, but they didn't have to sign up to speak, is what I'm saying, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, for this portion I did. If they wanted to speak with Michael Keith was the.
That your understanding, Melissa? They had to sign up for this portion.
Yes.
No, they don't.
Mm-mm.
That's
I don't
what
think
we
so.
were told when we came in.
No, this board meeting, they do not have to have that form.
Right.
Bill Baker did send me that, but it was not required in order to speak. I put the sign-up list so that there would be some order to, as to who.
Would anybody else like to speak?
Come up.
No, I'm not coming up there.
The microphone's up there so they can hear you.
So that the community can hear you.
Yeah. Seriously, the microphone's on the podium.
I'm telling you, I've been here for 30 years, and we've only not had a supplemental levy for 2. And that was because Mr. Kress promised the taxpayers if we voted it on, we would not have a supplemental. But other than that, since Clark Harding, we have lived with the supplemental. Not 500,000, we started, it was like 200. But, I mean, 30 years ago, we were having a
He said it was about 30% of his taxes. Is that kind of normal? Seeing the state audio, is that roughly like people when we see them? You know, regular capacity, is that out of line, or is that normal, or is it above, below?
I couldn't tell you that. I don't know.
You know, it'd be interesting to actually, somebody look and just see.
I have 2 properties up here, and one of them I'm pretty sure is lower than that, but the other one I think is right around.
Yeah. So Boise County, the town itself, does a .003. So they must be another 35 or 40%. Then you pay the road, because your county roads. So.
I was just wondering.
But what Bill said was that
Yes, I'm just wondering, are we like in an unusual situation?
what's that?
This is just Idaho in general, you know, roughly. Are we talking about more or less than the average?
Charlie, why don't you come up here and ask that question so people at home can hear it?
Like you said, you thought it was about 30%. That's pretty accurate. Yeah. What I was talking to Sky about is that normal? You know, what about the folks in New Plymouth? Napa, Caldwell, you know,
And
are we freaking out? I mean, are we spending too much, or is this, you know, the state and the feds making us reach out that hard to everybody? Or are we spending too much money, or are we just normal like everybody else? I think, you know, if somebody had time to kind of research that, I think if this goes to vote, you know, I think that's a good thing to bring up. You know, we're within 2% of everybody else in the state. You know, there's always been a thing, like Lydia was saying, is everybody seems to think the school wastes a lot of money. You know, it's been that way, and I've been here a long time. Maybe they do, maybe they don't, but are we normal or not?
2021, Ada County, the 3 largest taxing districts in Boise are Boise City, Boise School District, and Ada County. 32% was to Boise School District.
So we're kind of normal.
Well, for right here in our bubble, but
Right.
it's the first thing I can find.
No, but, well, that's a good sign. You know, at least we're not like something weird. You know what I mean? That's what I wanted people to know, that you might be able to scrimp and save a little more. You know, are we, you know, kind of close to everybody else? That's what I wanted to know. And with Lisa saying that, you know, already that's a lot of kids, a lot of homes, and we're kind of even with them.
Thank you,
So,
Charlie.
right? So
Appreciate it.
at least we're kind of normal.
I didn't put my name down on the list. I didn't know I was going to speak. But I don't like to pay taxes just because some other jurisdiction is doing it. I don't like to be normal. We bill this every 2 years. If I go buy a car and I finance it for 2 years, I'm happy when my 2 years is up because % in taxes to the school district. I'm 70 years old. I have no children in school, haven't had them in school for 27 years. I'm paying about $1,500 a year to this school district. Personally, I get no benefit. Community-wise, there is a benefit, should be over with. And you need to go back to your line items and start scratching, because at some point, you're going to get a no. But it doesn't sound like to me at this time, you ever anticipate a no, and it's your continuing plan to do a supplemental. I will be voting no, because we got to stop this stuff. I don't need to be normal.
Okay, I will talk. Now they can do it in front of everybody. Lisa Willie. I have 3 kids that go to school here. I went to school here. My husband went to school here. Love this school, love this community. I am a firm believer in funding education. We know at the federal and state levels that's got a lot to be said as far as not happening. As far as not having any kids in school, somebody paid for your kids to go to school. Somebody paid for you to go to school. Somebody's paying for your grandkids to go to school. Somebody is paying for your nieces and nephews to go to school. That means you're paying for your future doctors, teachers, nurses, whatever it may be. And it's part of being a community. I do believe in fiscal responsibility. That is 100%. I don't get to ask for more money when I can't pay my bills, so I live within my means. That being said, I know the school has obligations that they have no choice but to meet. They can't get around it. They have to have the money, because if they don't provide those services, they are not in compliance. So I think when you're considering this, there are many facets that unless you talk to people that are managing it on a daily basis, you might not understand all the working parts. I don't understand them all. I try to learn more. I try to ask questions, but it's not as black and white as it may be. I went to school in that building where every winter, the center building where the superintendent's office was, smelled like burnt hair for 3 months because it was old and decrepit and nasty. And we were expected to learn in that environment, and we did. But we always, don't you want more for the next generation? They tried, how many years did they try to get the bond to pass for this school building? 13 years. And correct me if I'm wrong, but they whittled it down and whittled it down and whittled it down in order to get it to pass. And now we're at capacity. I wonder why, you know? So I would just really, really encourage people to look into it further than what you read on Facebook, what you hear in these meetings. Talk to Lydia. She's great at answering questions. Talk to Sky. Talk to whoever it is that's actually part of the working facet of the district.
Thank you, Ms. Willie.
Well, I feel like I'm the only one that didn't talk, so I guess I better give it a turn. To be honest, I'm kind of on the fence on the whole thing, because on one hand, I look at what we asked for before was 400,000. This is 500,000. $100,000 difference doesn't seem like a huge jump to me if it's being used responsibly now and it's necessary. I look at the cost of maintenance and everything else for our house, and that doesn't seem like out of line to me. But I'm also sympathetic with folks that are retired up here. We have a lot of them, and they're on a fixed income, and I want to make sure that we're not putting a burden that's not necessary on them. I guess I look at some of the ways that the money's spent now, particularly the COVID money, and for me personally, like, I know it seems like a good deal for everybody when we don't have to pay for lunch for the kids or buy school supplies, but I feel like I'm responsible for that. I would rather see that money help folks that are retired out, reduce the costs of just running the school. And I guess I do look at the way the funding is now, and it makes me a little bit nervous how much we rely on the COVID for all of these things on this list. And I wonder what's going to happen to all those things, or if they were really necessary. If they weren't necessary, maybe we should have been using those to fund the operations. And if they are necessary, then we're probably going to have to figure out a different way to fund those. And I don't see that the difference is going to do that, an extra 100,000. So that was my thoughts on it. It's interesting to me to see how all this works. I guess I was a little bit pretty good with numbers, but I was a little bit stymied going through all the financial stuff, because on one hand, you look at a chart and everybody's home values are going way up, and then you look at the other number, that multiplier, and it's going down. Well, really all that matters to me is how much are my taxes this year towards the school versus last year. A little bit of an increase is okay with me, because I understand that it costs more to run the school, but I was having a hard time seeing that part, like what the increase is going to be. And then another thing that stood out to me, which I'm sure Lydia can answer this question for me, because it's a budget question, but I look at the years and the bond levy and how much we paid towards that. And I was just curious, why does it change over time from year to year?
Best answer ever. It changes because I tried to keep the tax rate level. Because when I came to the position, that's what the auditor said. Tax rate go very low. The taxpayers are never going to want it to come back up. So anytime we had to ask for more, we had 2 emergency supplemental levies. So for both of those, and I back off how much bond money I asked for, because I have kept a reserve. I think I've been very frugal with the school's funds, and I don't believe there's a lot of waste. And I don't think there's a lot of things to cut. If someone has ideas and wants to come and sit with me and put away the budget, my door is always open. I am always open.
Yeah.
But the reason why it changed was basically trying to keep the tax rate level. And because of the growth, I haven't been able to do that. It has actually, it has been decreasing. At one point, which the gentleman that's not asking about mountain monitors, I wanted to jack up the bond amount and try to get it paid off, because we do know that the sewer system and water and generator are all things that we need. And that's coming down the pipe. So I wanted the bond paid off, but the cost of fuel, our transportation for the buses, things have just gone crazy. So, and we'll just keep paying the bond will be paid off in 2028. And I'm hoping that we hold the sewer system together unless we can get grants. And we are looking, Mountain Water Works is supposed to be helping look for grants for the water and the sewer.
So the original bond to pay for the school will be paid in 2028? Okay, that's why I was curious, because that number goes up and down, so we're not required to, it's not like a car payment where you just pay the same every month.
Thank you, Ken.
Yeah, thanks. I'm sure I used my time.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. All right, moving on to, first of all, thank you all for your input and for communicating to the board. It is important, and that's why we held this meeting, was we wanted to hear from as many of you as possible. Item 8 is board discussion on the supplemental levy. I want to kick this off by letting everyone know that we have these questions from the community that have been asked, and we've talked about possible cutting. I am going to, this is something that we work on constantly, especially Lydia and Mr. Thompson. But I will be here at the school until they tell me I can't be here anymore. And I'll ask and look and see if I can't answer these questions. What can we cut? Are we using things where we should, the way that we should? I don't take this lightly. I understand that this is a financial burden, on the community. But I also do, I do believe that we owe it to the kids in this community to give them the best experience in school that we can. And that they deserve to get a proper education and to be able to have the facilities, the teachers, the extracurricular activities, things to truly round out their primary and secondary education here in the community. But do either of you have anything that you'd like to talk about?
Yeah, I would encourage members of the public to speak to your board trustee. At this meeting, we don't do the back and forth answering questions, but you could speak to us outside of this meeting. Rob, you haven't been on the board for a long time, so maybe some people ask you a question, here's some information. Our annual budget is on the website, and members of the public can have a look at it. So if you have a budget question, you could send people there. It is a long document. It's a big document. So, I know about it because I'm treasurer, but also we have an annual budget meeting. So sometimes in our one of our board meetings, we have a special meeting dedicated to the budget. And, that's when, that's just before we vote on it, and then it becomes kind of what we're going to do. There's a lot of information on our website, and Melissa's a question/comment for you. Can you put some of this information on the website?
I can take the documents that are available at this meeting and I can put them on the website with the minutes.
Thank you.
I think that would be helpful.
And then also the COVID money, one, it's great to have it. Two, it's dedicated. Three, it takes a heck of a lot of admin to monitor those funds, and the board is, and you've been in some of that meetings where we've discussed it, looked at it specifically on how those funds could be used, and that's something that we are doing. Then there's another thing that I think you need to look into. It's called dedicated funds, and very often what happens is once funds are dedicated, then that's what they go to. That's the only thing that can be used for. But sometimes as a board, our hands are tied because the legislature will dictate to us what we have to pay for, but they will not give us the money to pay for that. So by law, we have to do these things, but they are not given the money to do that. So sometimes as a school board, our hands are tied, and yeah, there are common sense solutions, but our hands are tied. So those are some things just to put in your memory bank in case, people really do call you and ask you some questions. So those are my comments, Mr. Chair.
And Morris, your comments, brought up something that was also stated. I think Michael went over it. He talked about the financial crisis back in 2008, 2007, 2008. I can tell you, at least based on my limited knowledge of financial matters, we are looking at another financial crisis in the very near future. So we need to, I think it's a good time that we need to look at strategies budget strategies and funding strategies should things go south.
So we will be making a decision on this supplemental levy our next regular scheduled board meeting, which is it the 9th? 11th. The 11th, which is next Tuesday, this Tuesday, depending on how you look at it. The Tuesday of next week. So I encourage all of our community members, if you have more questions, please reach out to us. If you would like to speak at that board meeting, please come in, fill out what is it called? The 4105 and 4105F. And please come. We would love to hear from the community and from the public.
Oh, Sky, one more thing. If the public emails comments to me, I will forward it to all board members.
Okay.
And my email is on the agenda.
So if you have any questions that you may like answered, you can send those to Melissa and she can forward those to the board members as well, is what she's saying. Are there any other comments that either of you two gentlemen have on the supplemental levy and what we've heard today? And yes.
Before the meeting, depending on how we decide what to do, will you get some information from the attorney for the wording on the ballot?
Yes.
Thank you. That's all.
All righty. If that is all, then this meeting is adjourned.
Can I get clarity?
The meeting is adjourned.
That's okay, your meeting's adjourned. You did say though, if we ask questions next meeting, you as a board would answer. That's what you said.
No, if you have questions that you would like us to answer before the meeting, or I could answer a question in a meeting if I have that question asked to me before the meeting, then yes. But you cannot ask me a question in the meeting and me answer. No, if that's what you're.
Thank you for the clarity.
Yes, you're welcome. And we'll see everybody here hopefully at our next scheduled meeting.
Our bond attorney would have the wording for us next week to review. So I'll make sure I get that out to you guys.
Or do we see it before?
It's a legal principle.
Yeah. I just needed to give her the amount and then she can pull it together.
Yeah.